Hi everyone, so if you made it this far, I didn't bore you too much in the last video going through the differential. On this one we're going to be looking at getting the engine out. We're going to see what damage I've caused on the inner wings. When I've built the car I tried to make it as easy as possible to work on, so we're going to put that to the test. Hopefully everything goes alright. It should come out fairly easy, although I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because there's a front end missing. But looking at it, I feel like it'll come undone alright. I'll go through a few things that I fitted to the car that made it really easy to work on. I think there's a few bits where I'll try and advise people if you're looking at doing a DCT conversion, best thing to do with those, like fitting the quick release lines. There's a bit of a cheat as well because I ain't going to drain many fluids because it did it itself in the accident. But yeah, feel like everything should go quite good on this video and we can get it out in a reasonable amount of time. So the first thing that we're going to do is disconnect the DCT cooler. The DCT cooler is connected up with the quick release lines. These are what I'd probably always advise fitting if you're going on the DCT route. Just because, one, it makes it really easy to fill the gearbox up from the top side as long as you know the correct amount that you're wanting to fill the gearbox up with. The other thing is, whenever you're swapping the rads, whenever you're changing anything, like for me, when I'm lifting the engine in and out, it just makes it a hell of a lot easier that I can give it a little push, twist, that's that disconnected, there's no fluid loss, everything stays as it is. I can pull the gearbox out and the oil remains in the box without me having to top it up. So they just come off like that. So now the oil lines are out of the way, the next thing that we're going to tackle is we're going to take off the air boxes, the plenum chambers. Once these are out of the way, we can start looking at then disconnecting the rads. With the rads, I've left them on the BMW quick release clips, so they're not like a TVR where every Jubilee has to be undone. The other thing that we can do whilst I've got these off, which was one of my plans to do eventually with the car, is there's quite a lot of joins in each pipe, which, because I've had to make all the pipes up custom, I've had to use little connection pieces, little 90 degrees. When the engine's out and the front end's getting repaired, I'll be looking at getting these sent off and more than likely have them built into a one-piece, like every individual pipe built into a one-piece pipe. That'll just secure it from leaking. The more joins you have in any rad hose, it's just a weakness in the area. Even though they shouldn't leak, over time they could go, like the Jubilees could go brittle, the pipes could deteriorate. It's just nicer to have it all in one piece. So once they're out of the way, we'll start looking at getting a bit of the oil filter out of the way. We'll probably loosen off the power steering so that the engine can swing out of the top and and clear it. Other than that, I think the front end, there won't be much more to take off. It'll just be a case of undoing your fuel lines, your power lead. We may have to undo the steering column because it gets in the way of the sunpan. Other than that, it's quite close to already coming out just because of the, like I mentioned at the start, the fluids and everything's already been drained. So yeah, we'll get cracking and we'll look at getting it out. about 90% of the way there on the top. The fuel line's been undone, the wiring loom, I'm going to take that off separate from the engine. Main reason for it is the ECU is inside the car and it's all part of the engine loom. Unlike a BMW, you'd normally find it in the fuse box area up here, but I've had to feed it through the bulkhead, leave it attached, so that will be just folded up over the heater box. We might have got the odd little other bits, so there's like a separate loom for the TVR sensors, that will stay with the engine. We've done most of the other stuff, so the oil feeds are out of the way. I've loosened off the power steering pump. The main reason for this is because it sits quite high, the engine's got to come up at about 45 degrees and then it'll should clear everything. We've had to take the wiper mechanism off, just like I say, because it's really tight. The wiring loom sits quite close to it there, so removing it makes it easier to take the wiring loom off. The water pipes, they've all come out of the way obviously now, which I was showing you before with the quick release. We may have to get to the odd little water pipe as it's coming up in the air, but it just makes it easier as it's further out the engine bay to access that point. The underside, there's not that much to do because we took the prop shaft off in the last video. We'll have to take the driver's wheel off as the steering column runs. It's not like your standard Tvr Sagaris anymore, where the Tvr Sagaris will go through the inner wing. The steering column goes through the footwell just above the brake pedal box. It's also got another oil feed, so I'm trying to remember now whether it's the oil feed or the return pipe, but either way there's that connection there that we need to undo. Once that's undone, I think we should be good for lifting it out, and then we can have a really good look to see what's been damaged. The other thing I want to discuss in the video is I'll show you some of the upgrades I'm going to be doing to the chassis, and because the driver side front wheel arch has exploded and we can get good access to that, I might peel a little bit of that back just to see what room we've got inside the wheel arch, because the one thing the car hasn't got, which I do want to add to it, is air conditioning. So to add an aircon pump in on the engine, it's not doable. There's not enough room in the engine bay to get an aircon pump on powered by the engine. So what we'll be looking at is retrofitting an electric aircon pump. That isn't probably going to be done for this year. Obviously, the bigger job for this year is getting it finished so I can try and get it to some shows. I did promise you I'll crack on with this. This will be, I'll not stop messing with this until I can't go any further, and that's more than that with the bodywork, which I have opted to try and help out with the bodywork. I'm not saying I'll do a perfect job of it, but I just want to try and speed up and get this car back on road. So we'll have a look then, and we'll get it up in the air and we'll do all the underside. Right, so we're more or less there now with the top side of the engine. We've already done the prop shaft on the other video, so that's all taken care of. You can see here that the oil feed pipe's been undone. We've done the engine mounts because the engine mounts ties into the under tray, which also acts as like a strut brace, which will run from either side of the engine mounts to add a bit more strength into the chassis. The DCT lines, they run from the box over the top of the engine on the quick releases, so they're all taken care of. We've got the selector on the side of the gearbox for the safety park switch. So what that does is, when the DCT gearbox builds up pressure, so when you select a gear, it releases the lockout of the gearbox. That goes up to a solenoid which will like hold it in place. The main reason for this is the last thing you want to be doing is heading down the road at 70 mile an hour on the M18 in the ice, and you don't want that gearbox to lock up. So what that does is it pushes a little rod past an actuator, the actuator locks into place, and then I've got a button in the car where once I press park, if the engine's shut off, it will allow that to drop back down. But while the engine's running, it pushes that rod up, and the actuator, if the gearbox ever fails, the engine ever fails, that'll hold the rod out of the way, so it'll never let the gearbox lock up unless I press the button. But like I say, for that to fail, the gearbox would have to fail, and I'd also have to press the button to release it, to lock it back into gear. So we've got to look at getting that cable off the side of the gearbox before we can pull the engine forward. But we're more or less there now. I might drop the anti-roll bar down ever so slightly. The anti-roll bar is trapped between the under tray, just like any other TVR. So that's just a case of pulling it down. So yeah, looks like it's more or less out. Should be another 20 minutes and I think we should have it on floor. So now it's the real fiddler bit. So we've got one more water pipe to get at the back of the head. We've got to tuck the wiring out of the way, and then it's a case of getting the engine hoisted. So when I'm doing it, I want to try and avoid the chassis and then avoid the front end. We don't want to damage it any more than what it already is, especially the paintwork. So it is a lot harder of a job to get the engine out when the front end is on. But with the front end being off, we can get really close with the engine hoist. The main reason it's a bit tricky when the front cone is on is I have to go at it from an angle with the engine crane. So I'll go at like 45 degrees, try and pick the engine up, and then swing it over the front. Whereas the situation that we're in at the minute, where there's no front end on, I can go really up to the chassis, hook the engine up, bring it out. Like I say, we want to be aiming the front end of the engine up in the air. We've got the jack ready on the gearbox. That'll help support the gearbox, and as we get to a point where we're wanting to dodge that chassis, we can push the gearbox up in the air into the tunnel while the front end of the engine goes up. It's a bit fiddly with one person, but shouldn't be too hard. And once that's on the floor, we'll have a look at the inner wings. So the engine's now on the floor. You can see quite a few of the bits that we've had to take off. So then there's the engine bay. So as you can see, the passenger side didn't really take much of a whack. It was more the front end tearing away. So you've still got quite a bit of that structurally all right. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to be replacing it quite far back, all into that top corner. The main reason for this, it has fractured the odd places where you can see just here, where the bonnet decided to hit it. But there, you can see the passenger side, the driver's side has took quite a big whack. So the moulds there for the air intakes, they're all damaged. You can see there, the outer wing. But other than that, it's not too bad. So now the engine's out, we can start looking at what I want to modify. The main area I want to modify is this structural part here. So I want to take a section out, and the main reason for this is where they sit, the front splitters with the shark teeth, there's like 3 fins that curl off. Well, there's like a square gap there that hits the chassis leg, so as the air travels through, it gets blocked by this. Now the main reason I want to open this up is my air filters sit in the wheel arch here. So I want to put this box section in, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking a section out of this, welding this in. So once that's welded in, there'll be a little lip left to it. The reason for this is I'll have something either 3D printed or make something out of carbon or fiberglass, and that will try and scoop a load of the air coming through the front end of the car. Then to the back side of this, I'll same again, leave a lip, and I'll send it up through the wishbone arms so it doesn't interfere with anything. So we've got a nice lovely gap here. So that'll then funnel it up straight into the intakes. So at high speed it should flow through nice, it should get the air that it needs, and obviously when the engine's going at full power it'll be basically getting air rammed into there. So because TVR never designed it to have the air intakes on the inner wings, theirs was fed from, originally they were fed from the bottom, so the airbox had suck it up from the floor. This then should help flow the air a lot better with the system the engine that I fitted. The other modifications that I want to look into doing is, on this bit here I've had to add another radiator into there. So the radiator is sufficient enough at the front, but because it sits flat in the front end, the air has to get scooped in, round the bend, up and through. So to help with the airflow, I've basically put this in. But this was just a rough piece, so this is to try and scoop it from under the nose. So as the car's travelling, obviously at speeds, it'll start ramming air through the second radiator here. So what I want to do is I want to seal all this off, so when the air goes through, it's got nowhere else to go other than through the radiator. So that should help with cooling as well. It's not had any issues with cooling, but I've not tested it in the peak of summer, even though we don't get really good weather in the summer. On the hot days, I don't want it overheating, and I want to maximise as much airflow as I possibly can through the radiators. So they're the 2 areas I'm going to look at first. On the body, there's another area I want to modify on the front nose cone, but I'll show you that at a later date on another video when the front end starts getting reassembled. So if you like what you've seen today, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I promise I'll start getting happy. I've got a frowny face, I'll always look like I'm mad, but I promise you I'm not. But yeah, thank you for viewing, and hope we'll see you in the next video.